r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. People who grew up with Doomsday Prepper parents. What was it like? This makes me think of the mother of a friend of mine. She had a small room off the side of the kitchen. Shelves filled floor to ceiling with tins. It wasn't about doomsday. She had starved as a child in Holland during World War II. Aged around 5. She didn't do any other prepping. I don't believe she thought it would happen again. She was a smart, capable woman living a continent away from Holland by the time I met her. I suspect the tins were a psychological safety net. A way of soothing childhood trauma. Pretty common, yes. My grandparents, especially the grandpas, did the same. They were born beginning of the 40s. Lived in cities which got completely bombed. They went hungry for years at a very young age. The topic came never up. But the trauma made them buy stuff in bulk and keep absurd amounts of food in the house at all times. They put shelves in the living rooms from the ceiling to the floor and hid the whole shelf wall with a curtain. My grandmas had it easier. They grew up in the countryside and their mothers managed to always get some food from their own gardens. I'm a bit of a prepper myself. But just to the extent of having a 2-month food and a 1-month water supply. I live in Manila. And the idea of an 8+ earthquake that wrecks the infrastructure of a metropolitan area with 13 million people is the stuff of nightmares. We are sort of prepping by default. Recently we moved to a rural area in eastern Canada. There is a very real chance we might get snowed in without power. We are stocking food and building a new pantry to hold more. We are installing a wood stove. I've got a mid-sized generator that can run on propane or gas, and I'm stockpiling propane tanks to run it. I also have a portable propane heater that runs off the same tanks. We installed a propane range and have a large tank for that. I could get a line to the generator. But I like the idea of being mobile with it and the heater. We have our own well and I just installed a new filtration system for it. We have our own septic system. Next year I'm going to look into solar or wind turbines so we can generate some of our own power. We've been here 3 months and right now I think we could easily go 1 week snowed in without power. Ideally I'd like to get this to 3 weeks. Dad wasn't a full-on doomsday prepper. But he was a paranoid schizophrenic. He had a stock of MREs that I had now and then. They weren't bad. Also canned Ensure back when it came in cans. Also learned a lot about stuff like maintaining salt after sweating. Dad used to have me lick a teaspoon of salt after our walks. Tons of flashlights and batteries in the house. I remember him teaching me how to use a gas mask just in case. We live in upstate NY. So yeah, not exactly a war zone. He had a generator just in case the power went out. Honestly not a bad idea because he lived in a place where winter could get pretty hairy. I will say Y2K had him totally spooked. We used to joke that he was Bert from Tremors minus the guns. Sounds like you didn't have it too bad. So I'm happy for you. I crave MREs every once in a while. I do enjoy them on occasion. Bottles and bottles and bottles of water in the garage. My mom bought the bulk packages from Costco and stuffed them there. I wouldn't be surprised if there were over 100 plastic containers in there. The world's gonna end panic mentality mostly comes from my mom's side. And it usually happens in waves. Things will be chill for a while. And the all of the sudden packages with no electricity hand crank radios and portable generators will show up at our door. She claims that she makes ambient purchases while half asleep. But I think she really just that paranoid. A few times. She's mentioned buying a cow. For its milk. In case we're forced to live off the land or whatever. So we can still have milk. And after explaining to her that no. We absolutely do not have the room or faculties to take care of a whole ass cow. She starts up with the same line of questioning. But asking if we can get a goat instead. We don't even have a front or backyard. I think you mean Ambien purchases. Like Ambien the sleep drug. Not saying your mom isn't batso. But that shit will duck you up. Lots of documented cases of sleep binge eating and or driving that victims have no recollection of. I have had entire evenings that I don't really remember. I vaguely remember my wife and I driving through the drive-thru of a Burger King with munchies one night giggling our asses off. We didn't have a car. My dad stocked textiles. Toiletries. non-perishables, and water to an extreme amount. Our entire basement was basically a bunker. It could be locked from the inside at both the top and the bottom of the stairs. And we had huge drums of potable water that probably stood to about stomach high on me now as an adult. We also kept old 2-liter bottles, old Pepsi bottles, for non-potable that we stacked like wine on heavy shelves, as well as rice and dried beans in vacuum sealed containers. He was constantly buying things at old surplus outlets. Gas masks, iodide tablets, rucksacks, etc. And taught us how to make bullets using a shell cleaner and powder packer. Like that one poster above mentioned. We also typically had about every few weeks a few days where we ate next to nothing. And were taught a lot of both local and non-local plants that could be edible, clover, acorns, dandelion, etc. and how to prepare them. As well as things that could be health beneficial, clover, cherry bark, mullein, etc. and how to prepare them. We rarely got to go hunting because of where we lived at the time. But he did teach us how to set various snares and traps, like figure fours and pitfalls. And anytime one of our traps succeeded, he would use it as an opportunity to teach us how to clean and prepare meat not just for that day, but how to cut and dry it for future use. I have to say, knowing how to brain tan a rabbit skin is not something I ever expected to come up in conversation as an adult as much as it actually does. I like hearing about the hunting and foraging skills. I could see those actually being useful in a more realistic emergency. I learned how to hunt when I was 6. For my 11th birthday, I learned how to make a bow and arrow with the contents of my hiking kit and caught a rabbit for lunch. I was then shown how to use said rabbit's bones and internal organs to fish. And we had trout and perch for dinner. My dad is of the mind that doomsday preppers who just stockpile food are idiots. Because even if they survive the apocalypse, all they're doing is turning themselves into particular fat swines for the inevitable bandits to look for. Better to be able to hunt and gather food. My doomsday kit is just a bug out bag in my walk-in pantry. I like your father's train of thought. He taught you self-reliance and you could survive without the pre-packaged food and move without being weighed down too much. His plan sounds more reliable than most others. And didn't make your life weird. We were always too poor to fully prepare for the end times, although my mom still believes they are coming. Fun fact. If you don't have food storage of your own, create a map of all the Mormons in your town so when shit goes down you can take theirs. This was actual advice from my mother. She grew up in Utah and it's a well-known fact that Mormons are supposed to hold on to 7 years of food storage at all times in case of Jesus. It was also a plot point in an SM. Sterling post-apocalyptic novel that a group of people stumbled across an abandoned Mormon house which set them up nicely for food for a bit. So yeah. Make a Mormon friend for the end times. Utah woman kills entire Mormon family after power outage. Claims she thought it was the end times. I grew up Southern Baptist. We were taught that the rapture was going to happen any day. Every night I was afraid to go to sleep because I might be raptured before I woke up. I wasn't going to get to grow up, get married or have children. As I went through my teenage years, I didn't plan for my future as I should have because we weren't going to be here next year. My mother never bought Christmas wrapping paper on sale because next Christmas wasn't going to come. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done many things differently. My BF grew up Jehovah's Witness and he said they constantly avoided planning anything in the future because the end times were always imminently arriving. Every news item about wars, souring relations between countries, natural disasters, etc. would just reinforce it. Parents don't bother sending kids to college because it won't be needed when Jesus sets up the new system. Luckily he insisted on going to college and is no longer part of that religion. He still gets triggered occasionally when there's a lot of bad news going around. I, raised Catholic. They didn't teach us about end times. Just good PPL all go to heaven. Bad people to hell. Etc. Always try to calm him whenever that happens. My parents aren't doomsday preppers by any stretch of the imagination. But we did live in an area where getting to the grocery store would be difficult if it snowed in. As such, we always had a pantry full of home canned stuff that we made together. and a huge vat of sauerkraut we make once a year when I go home for Christmas. That sounds practical. I feel there would be pleasant memories attached to this. My father had crates full of non-perishable food. Camping gear. Gas cookers. You name it. He had it. He stored that in a bunker he built, which was really just a big Anderson shelter. Did you have to run drills or were forced to camp out for weeks at a time? Terrific answer. I'm so glad you made the most of your experience and that you and your dad love each other. All respect. My mom hoards a ton of canned food everywhere in the house, along with random tools she's been told will be helpful and so many paper towels and rolls of toilet paper. The guns are another thing. Everyone in my family is content to let her do her thing and spend thousands of dollars prepping. There are so many useless things that take up a ridiculous amount of space there. All while she complained that we had too much stuff and needed to get rid of our actual belongings to make more room. Everyone she knows gets printouts of the newsletters she signed up for with prophecies about the end times. When I was still living at home, she'd walk into the room at random times to give me hour-long lectures about the coming wars and end times and how sinners are responsible for it. It was really stressful. Especially because I have anxiety, which I'm sure isn't because of growing up in a paranoid atmosphere at all less. And I still have nightmares about apocalyptic scenarios. I've forced myself to develop a more accepting view for my own sanity. Which is essentially, there are too many options to prepare for all of them. And I don't know how much I want to survive in a post-apocalyptic world anyway. So I'm going to enjoy the time I have without stressing too much about what ifs. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been really helpful for dealing with the paranoia that still pops up sometimes. And I really recommend it for anybody who grew up in that atmosphere and has anxiety stemming from it. Only semi-related, but your last paragraph is how I feel towards r/collapse. On one hand, they make great points about the ongoing effects of climate change. On the other hand, they are so obsessed with how right they are. They encourage each other to just bring in the idea of collapse to rain on the parade of viral friends family mentioning personal future hopes, dreams, and goals. And when a user mentions losing hope and personal motivation in their life due to the idea of collapse, they encourage that state of mind because being ill-adjusted to a sick society only helps to show that you are correct. Everyone else is sheeple who can't face the truth that the end is nigh. You're enlightened. That's why you know not to care about getting a job, having expectations in life, letting yourself be happy as if you are allowed to do that when the world is dying. In truth, the rest of us do know what they know. We also recognize that it's just not worth sacrificing all your current quality of life to keep thinking about something one person has no control over. If there is little time left, enjoy it while you can. Well, there was always food in the house. Did that influence your username? It was pretty much the same as any other normal family, I assume. We just went bulk shopping every few months. The only strangish thing is that we'd have a week out of every month that we'd have to kind of fast. We could have a pack of raisins and a bottle of water every day and that's all. What was the purpose of the fast? Serious honest question. Not quite that extreme. But I was raised JW, Jehovah's Witness. They didn't have a specific date, but it was always within the next decade. For sure. So I grew up thinking that all my non-JW friends would be dead within 10 years. Which was not a pleasant thought for a 6-year-old. In class I used to worry that Armageddon would strike and I'd be stuck in a classroom of dead people till my parents found me. Religion. SMH. That is seriously heavy stuff for a child to have to process. I was raised Mormon, so I personally have learned how to take care of myself and trust neighbors if shit hits the fan. I have some food saved, but the best system is to set up farms and try to have things like chickens to make more food. If the world goes under, your neighbors are very important. But I grew up with a stash of seeds in our food storage if help didn't come within the time it was out. Yeah, this is the element most preppers neglect. Forming a community with your neighbors will be crucial. Not me nor my parents. But my neighbors, being a man and a woman, believed the world was ending in 2012. Starting in 2010 they started collecting canned food and their house was just full of canned soup and ravioli to repent for Jesus in mid 2012. They gave all their stuff away except their off-road truck, their array of canned food, and some furniture. They also started collected real gold items and some diamonds, so if the economy crashed they could use it to trade for stuff. Come and past 2012 they are mostly back to normal, though they are apparently now into sexual domination because of how they specifically prepared for in 2012. I feel I don't want to know the specifics of that line of dominoes. Funny. I would have had the sex before the world was supposed to end. Ducking like and subscribe.